What? Does it have to be that structured?
Okay,
It's recording.
now.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I'm not on screen, but this is Janae, and I am Steve and Candy's daughter. And we wanted to come here today to the Family History Library just to record some of their life history. And so I'm excited for this. It's going to be fun. I've just got some prompts here, some questions that I already know the answer to, but down the road may be important. So let's start with your full names.
Okay, I'm Claudia Marie Olsen, used to be Harper, nicknamed Candy, basically from birth. So I'm known as Candy Olsen, which had nothing to do with Claudia Harper. But
As a side note, where did Candy come from?
there's conflicting stories about where the candy came from. My aunt, she was a great aunt, Opal, claimed that she thought Claudia was too long a name for such a sweet little thing, and she nicknamed me Candy. And my mother said that was nonsense. That was her nickname. So.
All right.
Stephen J. Olsen, and my middle name J is my father's name, and J. Olsen, and J's name was J. Lawrence Olsen, after his father, so thus we kind of kept that on with our sons. Bart Stephen, our twins, Bart Stephen Olsen and Prince Stephen Olsen.
And then we kind of kept it. We have Aubrey, who's Aubrey J.
Mm-hmm.
But we spelled it J-A-E to feminize, but still keep that family name going. So.
And that's another thing too about my name is that Claudia is after my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, who was named Claudia, and Marie is after my maternal grandmother, whose middle name was Marie.
Cool. Okay, Dad, well, let's start, actually, we'll do Mom first. Where and when were you born? And then if you can kind of describe your home and the town you grew up in. And Dad, you're going to have the same question after.
Okay, so I was born in Ogden, Utah, which was not at all the plan. My parents were quite young. They were 17 years old when I was born. And, excuse me, my father was working at Hill Air Force Base repairing planes for the Korean conflict. And so they wanted to be back home, which was Twin Falls, so that Mom could have the baby with her mother. And they went home for the weekend. They had to leave Sunday night because Dad had to be to work Monday morning, and I was born Monday morning at 8:30. We lived in Layton, and we didn't live there long enough for me to have any memories of it. It was a little apartment, I understand, and we were there till I was 6 months old. And my mom talked about a little girl next door that would regularly run out and run into her place with no clothes on. So I don't know anything about who she was. But after a while working at the Hill Air Force Base, it really bothered my dad that he was repairing planes to cause death and destruction. So he quit working there and went back to, we lived in Eden, Idaho. And he worked as a mechanic, which was what he was excellent at. He just did a very good job at that his whole life. And we lived in Eden till I was 5 years old. I have a few memories of that place, one of which is, I guess my grandparents came to visit. This is my paternal grandparents. And they'd lived in Montana at the time. And they arrived late at night, and when they knocked on the doors, nobody heard them. So they sent my uncle, who was actually just a couple of years older than me, through the bedroom window, and I remember waking up to somebody coming through the window. Then when I was 5 years old, we moved to Twin Falls, which is where I have most of my childhood memories.
Awesome. Okay, Dad. So the question again was, when were you born, where, and then describe your home and the town you grew up in.
Okay. When is February 16th, 1950, and I was born in Nephi, which is about 14 miles northwest of Fountain Green. And the town I grew up in was Fountain Green. That's where my dad grew up, and that's where my grandfather spent most of his life. Fountain Green's a little tiny town, a little farm community. I grew up on a farm, and so and it was a sheep ranch. It was a good experience because I learned how to watch the cycle of life there. By that I mean every year was about this time of the year in March, shearing sheep, and then the lambing started, and the sheep cycle was the lambing, then docking the lambs, then taking the sheep up on the range in the spring up into what was called Water Hollow, or as we always said it, Water Hollow. And that was up in the mountains, the low hills to the northeast of Fountain Green, where we had some private ground. And then in the summer, the sheep went on the mountain, which was over on the Manti-La-Sal National Forest above Fairview. And they were there from July until September. Then the lambs were ready to be shipped, and they brought semi-trucks up, and we loaded them on there, and away they went to get fatter or to the stockyards and get ready for processing. And then the sheep came off the Manti-La-Sal National Forest and back down onto our private ground up Water Hollow, and then back down. In my lifetime, it back down near in the fields south of town where we fed them during the winter, and then in the spring again the cycle started over. The farming cycle was in the spring. We plowed, we planted, we cut hay, 3 crops of hay, and took the hay and stacked it in the barn, and that's what we fed the sheep during the winter. So it was a good experience growing up that way, and I decided I would like to see our kids have that experience, and so you and your siblings were involved in changing the water and moving water pipes, and working with the sheep and going up to the sheep herd and things like that.
Got to help with the docking.
Yeah, the boys got to help with the docking, which wasn't exactly too appealing. We won't describe that here.
But they loved Puppy Power Cliffs.
Yes.
But they what?
Loved Puppy Power Cliffs.
Up on
Yeah,
the
the Puppy Power Cliffs up on the Manti-La-Sal, where we had the sheep during the summer, and there are still snowbanks in some of the places, and
in July.
in July, yeah, and sometimes even into August, depending on how much snow came in. And so it was good growing up there. Have a lot of fond memories of herding sheep and running around town in the summer and playing ball, playing basketball, playing baseball, football. We lived not very far from the city park, and so there were always kids available for a quick pick-me-up game. And I went to elementary school there in Fountain Green. I went to junior high school in a town 6 miles to the south in Moroni. And then for high school, we rode the bus on over from Moroni to Mount Pleasant, and that's where I went to high school at North San Bede High School.
Perfect.
I realized I did forget one thing. That's the birth date. So
Oh.
I was born on July 7th, 1952.
Okay. Okay, Mom, we're gonna toggle back to you for a minute. Tell me a little bit about your dad, his name, birth date, and then his parents, but then share a few memories you have of your dad.
Okay. My dad was named Delmer Vern Harper. Interestingly, his name was misspelled by the nurse on his birth certificate. It said Delmar on there, but my grandmother always intended it to be Delmer. He was born, I believe, in Burley, Idaho, which is where some of his family lived. And he was very talented in lots of ways. But when he was, I'm thinking probably 12, 13 years old, he developed a condition called Osgood-Schlatters. And the only way they had to treat it at that time was to put him in a full leg cast. And he was in that for over a year. And so it took away a lot of his spontaneity. I understand he used to like sports, but he was kind of behind when he got to the point that, it was more competitive, so he kind of dropped out of it. His parents, my grandmother's name is Claudia Delilah, and at that time it was Harper. Her maiden name was Stevens, and her husband, Vernal Albert Harper, he went by Vern. And I don't know if I know how they met, but they were married by the time she was 19. And my dad was born, I think, just, a year or so later. And the only real pictures I have are real solid memories. I do have a picture of my grandparents with my dad at a county fair. And it's so much style of the time that it just really stands out in my memory because of how much different it looks than pictures today. But that's a fun little picture to have. My grandfather, when he got married, excuse me, I'm getting that turned around. He was a
Are you already having dementia?
Yeah, I've got dementia moments.
Sometimes?
he was a printer for a newspaper, and that was something that was very good for him. And when it reached the point that my dad married young, and my dad wanted to be a mechanic, and at that point in time in cars, if you had the desire, you could self-train to become a mechanic. And he did. He had that desire. And so he was doing self-training, and his dad was just trying so hard. He'd say, I'll pay for your college. Go to college. Get a degree. Dad was not interested. He wanted his passion, which I think was a good thing, to be able to work in your passion. My grandmother, I'm not sure how long after she got married this was, but she went to cosmetology school, and she and my Aunt Opal went to California and stayed with an aunt of I think it was a sister of my grandpa, Vern, in California while they did their cosmetology school. And that was something that was a real good niche for my grandma. She just loved to visit, and her clients meant the world to her. In fact, in her older years, when she was with her third husband, she said, I'm not going to take any more new clients on, but I'm not going to let the clients go that I have. And it reached a point where Vic, her husband, would drive to pick up the clients and bring them to the house and then take them back home so that they could keep that business and that relationship going. My grandparents lived in Burley, in Kimberly and in, I think Montana is where they went from there. And my grandpa died in Montana when he was 46 years old, I think. He had a heart attack. Interestingly, it's treated differently now than it was then. He had been sitting in the doctor's office for about an hour waiting to be seen when he had the full-blown heart attack and died in the doctor's office. And that just devastated my grandma. By that point in time, they had adopted 3 children. My grandma couldn't have children after my dad. And so here she was with 3 children that she needed to raise, and she was just totally overwhelmed. So she moved to Twin Falls and relied on Dad pretty heavily for support as she raised those other kids. Did I leave anything out?
And then a few memories of your dad.
Okay, my dad. As I mentioned, Dad was just very good at mechanics, and so he spent a lot of time just working on vehicles. And I know one of the things people would say is, I have a mechanic for a husband or my car won't run. But Dad wasn't that way. He kept all of our vehicles in prime condition. In fact, he, at the time he was a service manager when his kids were going through the age of getting driver's license and such. And so he would watch for vehicles coming in that they had too many problems for people to want to repair them. It wasn't worth it. And so he would encourage them to go ahead and, trade out and get another vehicle. And then he he would buy the vehicle and totally rebuild it. And he was trying to teach us some things. I don't know how much we really learned, but he actually had us right beside him to rebuild the vehicles. I remember an awful lot of washing Ryan, what are they called? The valves? Is that what they're called? Washing the valves so that he could grind them down and put them back in. Anyway, so we got to do a lot of that. And I think one of the saddest stories, the car I had, my brother was pretty good at wrecking cars, and he drove some of my cars and wrecked 2 of them. And anyway, he went to, my dad had decided he was going to surprise me with a rebuilt car for my graduation gift. And I remember I was downstairs. My mom had a beauty salon downstairs, getting my hair done, getting ready for graduation services. And my dad was really a calm guy. And, nothing got under his skin very much. In fact, if we were ever in trouble, we went to Dad, not to Mom, so that we could get a more reasonable reaction. But he was downstairs with me getting ready, because he wanted to see my excitement, so he was down with getting ready. And all of a sudden he hears this crash. And he let out a string of swear words that I'm going, whoa, what? My car was totaled before I saw it. A girl was driving down the street, and a spider dropped down right in front of her range of vision and scared her to death, and she just jerked and ran into my car. So...
So this wasn't Chuck's fault.
This one wasn't Chuck's fault. No. Although after we were married, he borrowed our car one time, and he had it for about a week, and we told him that it burned oil, and we just about lost the car to not having oil added to it.
When he brought it back, first thing I did was pop the hood and think, I gotta hurry and check this because I just don't trust that he did it. And I pulled it out, and you couldn't even see oil on the dipstick. And I went, and then that's when I learned she could get mad at Chuck, but I couldn't, because if I got mad at him, then I was in the hot water.
That's right. That's right.
That's awesome. Okay, kind of same storyline for you, Dad.
Can I tell one more thing?
Yeah.
All right. Thinking back, some of the things are more picture memories than real memories. But when I'm guessing probably 9 months old, there's a picture of Dad laying on the couch with his knees up and me on his knees, kind of just being rocked a little bit. And he had a wrench that he put in my hand, and he was helping hold it. And he had his little mechanic's cap on my head, just jigging his daughter with his mechanical abilities. So.
Cool. Okay, kind of the same thing. You're talking a little bit about your
Dad.
your dad and his kind of history and then memories that you have of him.
Okay. Well, I really admired my dad. He was two words that come to mind when I think of him is hard worker. He just didn't seem to have a button that said, okay, I'm too tired to go. He just kept going and going. He was like the Energizer Bunny. And so I really looked up to and admired him that he could work so hard and go so long, and he wasn't much of a talker. When we'd go down on the farm once and occasionally, he'd tell me about stories about the farm and the sheep and different things like that, but mostly it was he got me to a point where I knew how to drive the tractor and cut the hay and windrow and bale and herd the sheep and stuff like that. So once he showed me how to do it, then it was, okay, do it. And I always wanted to please him and make him feel like I was measuring up to his standards, but he was mostly quiet, but occasionally he would get really kind of funny, and so I'll sometimes interesting insights into that are kind of worthwhile, but occasionally he was really a physically strong guy. I mean, his arms were bigger than mine. I always wished that I had arms like his and biceps and all that, but sometimes he would stand in front of the mirror and he'd go, "Can you believe I've got a physique like this?" And then he'd go,
See, you did that.
he did that from his dad.
He'd
having
make
to-
his biceps bounce like that. And I'd think, man, I want to have biceps like that when I grow up.
What about how he would make his head, his scalp move?
He could make his scalp move forward and back like that. I can't do that nearly as well. And but it was little moments like that. Oh, and he had one other saying that would be really fun, and that was, running down to a place called Redmond, which was about an hour and a half away, and we'd get the sheep salt. Throw in 50-pound bags of sheep salt in the back of the truck, and then on the way back, we weren't much for going out to eat at all. I don't think we ever went out to a restaurant as a family, but we did on these little kind of trips. I can remember thinking how hot and dry it was, and so then I'd say, "Hey, Dad, can we stop at the Dairy Queen?" And he'd go, "Yeah, I think I got a couple bucks in my wallet." So then we'd stop, and when we were eating our ice cream or our soda or whatever, he'd go, "Man, that just makes my taste buds stand right up and say, howdy."
Where that came from.
So that was a fond memory that I would tell you kids about. I still use it.
Yeah, I didn't know it came from Grandpa, actually. I knew you. I know you
Oh.
say it. I made bread last night, and I told Ryan, "You better react like my dad would react."
Tell about how your dad reacted when your mom finally made good bread. Do you remember that one?
I'm kind of blank for a sec.
Okay. She tried really hard to make bread, and he would always say, "Well, it's okay, but it's just not as good as Mom's."
Oh, I remember you saying that. Oh, did that make my mom?
Yeah, and so she got really frustrated with that. But she kept trying because he wanted homemade bread. Well, one day she'd gone shopping, and it was just when they'd started making the Rhodes frozen bread, and she thought, I've got a busy day. I think I'm just going to buy some of that and take it home. And so she took it and got it out and baked it all up and served it to him. And he looks at her and he says, finally, this is as good as Mom's.
Yeah, and she didn't let him live that down either. She had a good time teasing him about that. So I really, the fond memories were being on the horses as we go out around the sheep and listening to my dad explain to me how the sheep moved and how you want to, use your dogs to run them down this way and up, and because then they would come up the sides in the afternoon and the evening and then be back up on the top of the ridges for them to bed down, is what we called it, and get their salt and stuff like that.
And you also could not hold his hands, and he couldn't talk. If you held his hands down, he got mute. He had to have his hands moving to communicate.
Yeah. But from him, I learned how to make sourdough bread, sourdough pancakes. That's about all I know how to. Then everything else he would make would be, it wasn't like he was a great cook, but he could do that with sourdough. And then everything else was open a can up on the sheep camp, because he never cooked at home. He didn't do anything in the kitchen at home. But up there, if you don't, you got to do some your own or you starve. But then he would just open up cans, and he loved kipper snacks. And to me, the smell of those things were, they were sardines, right?
Right.
And all I knew is kipper snacks, and it was make my stomach roll because it was such a rotten smell. But he loved to eat kipper snacks, and then there was always a drawer where there were cookies and
Those little tip down
drawers. When we would stop pick up supplies, we'd make sure, hey Dad, do we get to have some spud nuts or things like that? And then they would be in there, and then when he would open them up, he'd say, have you been eating some of these while I've been out and taking care of feeding the horse or whatever? He was just teasing, but we had a lot of fun that way. And he wasn't much of an athletic guy, but I do remember that he liked to play softball. And in our little town, when I was growing up, some of the time he had sheep herders that were up taking care of the sheep, so he was down working on the farm, and if there was a softball game, sometimes they'd come get him and say, come on, Jay, you gotta get up here and play some softball tonight. And I remember one night he hit the ball and it went up and almost hit the lights out in the outfield. So it wasn't a frequent thing, but, whereas me, on the other hand, I was all about sports, wanting to play and stuff like that, but he was usually too busy on the farm to come and watch, and that was kind of something that I missed and wished he had been able to do. But anyway, those are some of my fond memories of my dad.
Awesome.
Good man.
Yeah, this is fun. Okay, we're gonna do the flip thing on your mom's.
Okay.
Same thing, just your mom.
All right. My mom, Joan D. Nelson, she was born September 10th, 1934 in Twin Falls, Idaho. She was, my grandpa, it was his second marriage. She was his first child in the second marriage. And Grandpa also worked as a mechanic, and so Mom had good experience around mechanics. But Mom spent her first few years of her life basically taking care of her mother. My grandmother had really bad asthma, and they just did not have good treatments for it then. Didn't have the antibiotics that we need so badly at times. And so I think up until Mom's early teens, for several years, she basically ran the household, which was a heavy burden for a little kid. She had to keep her eye out on her little brother and keep things clean, prepare the meals, take care of Grandma as best she could. But by the time she was a teenager, my grandma, they finally were able to have some treatments that could help her with her asthma, which actually included some really serious surgery. She had to have half of one lung and a third of another lung removed. But she was well enough that she just felt like she wanted to let her daughter be a kid. And so she basically, my mom went from being somebody who had to take all the responsibilities to somebody with no responsibility. And she took advantage of that and was running pretty wild and free. She dropped out of high school after her junior year, was married, I think they got married in November, which would have been her senior year, but they got married in November, and I was born in January. She and Dad didn't really have a relationship. They just met at a party and a child was conceived, and they made the best of that for 22 years. They were together for 22. She spent a lot of time, I think my kids got it, I think my sisters and brothers' kids got it, of don't be in a hurry to get married. You miss out on so much. Take time to live and enjoy life, because she really felt like she missed out on a lot having to jump into those responsibilities. And honestly, I think about taking care of children at the age of 17 years old. Yeah, you can do it, but that's really not where you want to be at that stage in life. So she tried really hard as a parent. She, being young, most of my friends really felt like that my mom was one of their friends, because she really reached out to the kids a lot. She was there for us, followed us on all of our activities, as did my dad, and did her best to be the best mom she knew how, which was at times almost impossible. And she dealt with some depression through that, only it wasn't recognized at the time. I was just thinking the other day, my mom, I'm thinking from the time I was probably 7 or 8 years old until I was in high school, was in the hospital at least every other winter with pneumonia. And she really struggled with that. She'd be laying in bed, and she was a fastidious housekeeper. And I knew that the way I could keep my mom happy was to make sure she couldn't see any dirt while she had to lay in bed. And so, at that time, the heating systems were such that you got cobwebs pretty easy. And so I was getting down cobwebs so she didn't have to lay there and see the cobwebs. But she did spend quite a bit of time struggling with that for several years. And I'm not sure this is the connection, but it finally just went away. And I think it might have been when she quit smoking, because she had smoked from the time she was maybe 15 years old. And I think quitting the smoking gave her the strength that she needed to overcome the pneumonia. She and my dad divorced not long after I got married. She spent 16, 17 years alone, where she learned a career and became very successful at it. She worked at a place called ITT Technical Institute as one of their sales reps, and usually was one of the top reps in the nation. She developed a great passion for giving kids an opportunity to get ahead. And she related to the kids really well, as she had when I was a kid. So she eventually married, I think 16, 17 years after, and married Dick Gehring. And I think they had a few good years, but they really spend a lot of their married time staying up different times of day to avoid each other. But they did stay together till she passed away. So you had something you want to say?
I'm kind of chuckling to myself because I'm thinking you ought to tell a story about your mom that's the kind of funny that as we take the kids to visit her and
Oh, you're talking about the food?
food, talk about the way she prepared food and all that kind of stuff. Just
Okay, yeah, she would over prepare, and she usually had some sort of magazine, Good Housekeeping or something, that she was getting recipes from, and some of the recipes were really strange. I remember there was one that I think it had green Jello and onions and grapes in it. Was that right? I think, yeah.
And if you didn't eat it,
Yeah, you were in trouble. And so the kids would rotate, depending on what they could get away with, between throwing it over the balcony
to the squirrels below.
to the squirrels below or down the garbage disposal. And once in a while, they'd take it down to the dumpster down the hallway and dump it out there. But
I
some
got
of her stuff,
caught once doing
yeah,
that.
you
Oh,
got
I'll
caught,
never
and it
forget
was
that.
not a pretty picture. But she over prepared. When she served dessert, she would have a half-gallon carton of ice cream, and she would cut the half-gallon carton into fourths, and you would eat your fourth. And I tell you, yeah, and that's after you'd had a full meal, you know. So, but she loved her kids and grandkids. When we would come, she had gotten coupons from everywhere, and she would take us on all these different activities. Well, she wouldn't take us because she was working. She would send us on all these activities that she got us deal of a deal on, and so she kept us busy while she was at work. And we spent a lot of time in her swimming pool and just enjoying being with her. There was a place that we overlooked called the Boise River Greenbelt. Yeah, the Boise River Greenbelt. And it looked over a place, I think it was called Ann Morrison Park. And you could sit right from her balcony and watch soccer games and baseball games. And so it was a pretty fun place to be.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, let's hear about.
well, my mom was she was a character, and but we loved to take you kids down to see Grandma and Grandpa because Grandma was always interested in doing special time with her grandkids, right? And she was always making spud nuts and cookies and bread and all kinds of stuff like that for when people would come, so she could, because she knew we loved to eat her specialty desserts. And I guess one of the things that I always think about when I think of my mom is that she was kind of a she was like a guardian angel in a way, and that she said something to me when I was just a kid that always stuck with me. Because growing up in this little town, there were kids just still doing things that were not exactly what they ought to be doing, and kids getting in trouble and smoking and getting drunk and stuff like that. Well, my mom, she saw that coming, and so one day she said to me, she said, "Stephen, moms know everything. We always find out. And if I find out, and when not if, but when I find out that you've done something that disappoints me, it'll break my heart." That was it. Game over. Every time one of my friends would say, "Hey, let's go out and blah, blah, blah," I was like, uh-oh, my mom's gonna find out. I can't break her heart. So she had a greater influence on me than anything else. And it wasn't because I was a real religious kid. It was just because I didn't want to break my mom's heart. So she had quite an influence. And she, like for example, she loved to tease and have fun and tell stories and memorize poems. And when we were going to go hunting deer in the fall, she had memorized this poem, and she would use this on us all the time to kind of needle us and tease us about going hunting deer. And the poem started out something like, it was only a little spotted fawn who hunted and hunted the whole day long for her beautiful mother who wandered away to graze and feed at the break of day. And the poem goes on to talk about the little fawn hears a shot from a rifle, and later on sees a car drive by with a doe on it with a glassy eye. Yes, it was my mother. Now she is gone. And she'd go through all that and just, we would laugh and laugh. But we knew that she was just having fun with us, but she was effective. She had a stroke when she was in her 70s, in her 70s, and it left her to where she couldn't speak very well. It was really hard on her because she loved to laugh and tell jokes and visit and all that kind of stuff, and she'd try and talk, and she got better and better to a certain point, but then when she'd say something like, well, you know, it's kind of like, oh poof. Oh poof.
She could always get that out.
She could always get that, oh poof. And then she kind of poked fun at herself, like, I can't remember how to say it. But Mom had a great influence on our family, and she was spunky, but anyway, I just have a lot of fond memories of her, and I remember one time, this will be kind of funny, she was ironing, and she said to me, Stephen, do you have any questions about the birds and the bees? And I said, no. She goes, okay. And that was it.
Just a little heads up, we've got 18 minutes.
Okay. Let's see. Maybe talk about a hardship or a tragedy that your family experienced while you were growing up.
You know, my first tragedy, I didn't know how, because I'd not experienced tragedy before, and I really didn't know how to handle it, because I was just a kid, but it was when my grandfather died. I was 7 years old when he passed away, and it just seemed unfathomable that he could be gone. And they'd lived in Montana, so we didn't get to see him that often, and I felt like I got deprived of really getting to know that grandpa. And interestingly, my second tragedy probably happened many years later when my other grandpa died, because he was my solid space. He was the person I knew I could always turn to. That was Grandpa Charles Nelson. We called him Chick. And they just lived, there was one house separating us, and I could always go to Grandpa. He was so loving and so kind, and pulled me up on his lap and let me do nonsense thing to me. I had quite thin hair, and that was back in the year when men used Brill cream to handle their hair. So I could take his hair. He kept it fairly long on top so that if there was anything there, but I could take it and comb it straight up and, you know, have this little greasy spot sticking up here, and we'd laugh and have fun with that. And he was so kind and so loving that it was hard to lose him. It was after Steve and I were married, so I think that provided some comfort in that I had my own family at that point. But I missed him a lot. Still miss him, actually. I'm trying to think if we've had any serious tragedies. You know, you think of tragedies in terms of somebody being really sick or dying, and in some ways I think we've been blessed, and in some ways I feel like we got a little bit deprived, because when our parents reached their senior years, all four of them went with various forms of dementia, and so we never really got permission to mourn their death. We just slowly lost them. And by the time they died, it was a relief. And in a way, I think that's kind of a tragedy, that you're relieved that they don't have to suffer anymore. So I guess that's my tragedies.
The first tragedy I remember is that when I was 8 years old, I believe, 7 or 8, Mom gave birth to a girl, and they named her Susan, and she never came home from the hospital. She was probably about 3 weeks old, and one night I remember at our house, and the phone rang, and Mom crying, and I never saw my dad cry, but Mom crying and saying that Susan had died, that she, and I never, it was something to do with her heart or kidneys, I can't remember which. But, and I remember that was my first experience with death. And I know my mom really, probably my dad too, really struggled with it, because I don't think it was very kosher then to talk about it much. But I remember her casket and her lying in it and the funeral, and I was at an age when I wasn't so much, I hadn't quite figured out what it was like to mourn over somebody else passing, but it made me think about me and my parents dying sometime. And that really affected me, because anytime they go somewhere, I know that I would kind of worry in my brain that they were going to be in a car wreck or something and die, and what would we do, and all that kind of stuff. But, and then the other, probably the big tragedy in our family was well into all of their kids being grown, but my younger brother David was, and his wife, they had, their kids were probably close to mostly raised.
They were. That's the reason they were down in Arizona, so their kids were grown.
And so it wasn't while they were young, but my brother David and his wife were killed in a car accident. It was a one car, slid off the road, and that kind of an accident. And those were the biggest, I would say, kind of tragedies in our lives.
Where are we at on time?
12.
Okay, we'll do one more. Tell me a little bit about holidays growing up. Do you have a holiday where there were traditions that stood out as something that you loved to do growing up with holiday traditions?
Holidays, well, any special day. My mom actually went overboard on it. So I don't remember that much as far as New Year's, but you know, Easter, I mean, we colored so many Easter eggs, I don't think we could have ever eaten them all, but somehow we did, and got so many treats. And then for my birthday, it was always, I can remember a picture when I was, probably 10 years old, where I was sitting on the floor and there were presents all around me that I'd opened up, and they put them all out and had them showing. She did the same thing at Christmas. She actually carried that on to when our kids were young. Our kids got more presents from Grandma than they got from us. And but I think maybe the most memorable holiday for me was Thanksgiving. We always had, my family wasn't as big as like your typical Mormon family. So we had my grandma Carlson lived a ways away at the time, and so it was always on my mom's side, and would be my mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, the three of us, my mom's cousin Jeannie and her 3 kids and her mom, and then there were 2 older ladies that I never could quite figure out how they fit in, but they were related somehow. And we all gathered at my Aunt Helen's, and Helen had her 2 sons, Eugene and Eddie, there, and we just had a great time. Pinochle was a big part of things. I remember learning to play pinochle, but it doesn't seem like people do that anymore, so I'd have to relearn it at this point in time. And just, she lived outside of town in Filer, and there were big fields across the street, and we had 4-wheelers that we went out. 4-wheelers were not a common thing back then. In fact, I think there were 3-wheelers. And the 3-wheelers, we'd go whipping around in the fields on the 3-wheelers, and usually Twin Falls was kind of known for being a banana belt, and Filer's just outside of Twin Falls, meaning that any snow that fell was usually gone by noon. And so pretty much most days of the year you could go out, bundle up, and get on a snowmobile, and not a snowmobile, a 3-wheeler, and just have a good time. So that was probably where some of my best memories are, and I still have some relationships, mostly Facebook contacts at this point with the people from that point in my life. But it was a very nuclear bunch. My mom's brother lived in California, so that family wasn't there. But we just had a good time, and it was solid. The food was great. Nobody could make a pie like my grandma. I've never tasted a pie better than hers, and there was always way too much food. And so we had leftovers for probably at least 10 days, but we just thoroughly enjoyed our time there. Then right after Thanksgiving, we would go and cut down our own Christmas tree. And Mom could not picture the size of a tree in the outdoors. She always wanted Dad to cut down a 20-foot tree. So he had to do a lot of talking to her and saying, Joan, stand up by it. How much taller is it than you? But we always went in that, and again, the weather was warm enough that mostly we went in the truck, and then we're sitting in the back with the tree prickling us coming home. It's just, we just had great times with that, and we always had our tree up just right after Thanksgiving, and then pulled it down the day after Christmas. And for Mom, because she loved the gift side of it so much. Once the tree didn't have presents under it, she wanted nothing to do with it, so it came down immediately. But we thoroughly enjoyed those times, enjoyed the Christmas holidays being with family, where it was usually more laid back than usual. So anyway, one thing I kind of remember, and it's a weird little memory, was my mom and my dad were both smokers, and I remember one Christmas time realizing that the air was blue. They smoked so much. And I'm going, whoa, I didn't realize there was that much smoke in here. But in the wintertime, we didn't get to air it out. So, yeah.
Well, for me, on holidays and stuff like that, it was the flip of her. For Christmas, growing up, you got one thing. Said what it is, and hope you got it. Because Dad was very well off with farming, and so I remember the big Christmases for me were when I was 14, I got a .22 rifle, and before that I had a pellet gun, and before that I had a BB gun, and I think I got those at Christmas time. And then birthdays were We didn't have party. I mean, it wasn't a party. It was like mom made a birthday cake for you. That,
Which was good.
which was good. It was really good. And so that was, you know, one thing I really had to adjust to when we got married was at Christmas. Whereas we had a tree and there were a few little presents around it, one for each kid. Her mom would drive up
Carload.
with a carload, and I almost was worried about it because it was like, these kids are not going to appreciate any of it. It's too much. But I got over that.
Do you remember the one year when you were in college? We lived in apartments in an apartment in Orem, and people knew we were struggling. You know, college kids, 3 kid babies, and so people knew we were struggling, and we got put on the list for people who need help at Christmas. And so my mom had come and brought all her stuff, and we wake up Christmas morning to all this stuff from people in the ward. And we're looking, oh my gosh, how do you say, give this to somebody else? You know, but it was so ridiculous how much you kids got that year.
And I did one thing because that we were always working. There was like this huge stampede in the summer, and we couldn't go do that very much because we were in the middle of hay. It was either we were in the middle of hay, middle of moving sheep, middle of doing some kind of farm work, and so I remember as a kid resenting that. How come the other kids, a lot of the other kids, my friends, were going and doing fun things, but my dad was not a holiday celebrator. It was, as long as there's work to do, and there always was, it's got to be done.
So tell me, was Cedar Hill a thing when you were a kid?
Oh,
Or did
yeah.
that happen more?
Well, but we did that. We did the Cedar Hill at Easter, but that was when we were lambing. And so we would get the lambs all picked up and taken care of. Then we'd run up on the Cedar Hill and do eggs and a few things like that. But all the time it was, we got to get back down and take care of the lambs that are being born while we're gone. So it was hurry and celebrate and get back to work.
All right. Awesome. Okay, where are we at?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay, this is maybe a tricky one, but maybe each of you talk about something you see as your strengths individually.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, that is hard to look at your strengths.
We're supposed to look at our own strengths.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, right. I think it's easier for us to say, like I would say his strength is his people skills and his ability to educate. And he would say my strengths are my ability to understand technology and work with it. But,
I'm so glad you know how to take care of our technology stuff every day. Not a day goes by that I don't go, honey, I can't figure out how to do this on the computer. Will you come here and blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
And she does it.
And I do.
Yes, you do.
And as he's gotten in his retirement years, I've slowed way down what I do because he wants to learn it. Before it was just do it so I can get on to the next thing, But now he wants to learn it, so we slow down the learning process and work to try to help him learn it. But I think both of us have a lot of strength in supporting and being there for each other. And I don't know. Is there anything else we would want to say as far as?
Yeah, well, I feel like my whole life was kind of guided because I was born on a farm and I knew I liked to do that, although I wasn't really good at it. And then I got into education, loved to teach, and then I became a consultant and traveled, and I look back on my life and I go, the good news is I don't have any big regrets. It worked out. And now because of the things we got to experience and do. Now we get to go and travel and vacation and see the world and do things like that that I never thought we'd be able to do. So it worked out pretty good.
Yep.
She
so-
is the best.
I really feel like I'd like to do this one more time
Uh-huh.
because we're kind of
Totally.
through your, up to the point where you had us, right?
Mhm.
And now I'd like to just talk about memories from raising us and then into being grandparents.
Mm.
Uh-huh.
So are you guys okay if I would love on a Sunday or something to just do